All right, what is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, Coach JK McLeod, and today's free flowing Friday episode is intended to be a short one. Just turned 47 a few days ago, and quite often birthdays tend to come with reflection. For myself, I tend to identify as one of those folks who really just takes some time, usually a few days after my birthday. And for frame of reference, this is coming out on Friday, September 5th, and my birthday was this past Saturday on August 30th. So I'm right in that sweet spot of really sitting down to take the time and do some reflection. And quite often, it's easy to attach some sort of a number or a theme. So it's like 47 things that I've learned, or 47 lessons, which are basically the same things, lessons and learned. However, yeah, I'm not sure that I can think of 47 different things. So I just want to share some reflection with you around something that I've really been sitting with. And it's this idea that being unbothered doesn't mean the same as being uncaring. So before getting into today's episode, I first, as always, want to say thank you for choosing to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. I know that you have plenty of other podcasts that you could be consuming at this very moment in time. So I truly never take it for granted that you chose to press play and include the Help Me Understand podcast in your podcast listening. So thank you so very much. So getting back to what I want to talk about today, and again, what I've jotted down here is just this reminder as I've thought back over not just the past year, but really as far back as I can remember, and reflecting as now being the father of a 19 and 13-year-old. Side note, my son, who just turned 13, we have the same exact birthday, both born on August 30th. So when he was born 13 years ago, that officially topped the list of best birthday presents that I've ever been given. So definitely got to give a shout out to my wife, Emily, because there's at that, for me, once we hit that particular point on my birthday with Mace being born, there was nothing that was really going to top that as far as a birthday gift. So certainly feel free to try, but I don't know if anybody's ever going to beat that for me. So as I think back though, and reflect again as a father of a now 19 and 13-year-old, and a husband and a son who, as of this moment, is still blessed to have both my parents in my life, just really thinking back over a number of years and really reflecting on, okay, what are some things that I can reflect on and then also move forward with. And again, this idea, unbothered not being a matter of uncaring. I want to talk a bit about what I mean by that, and the two things that really play the most significant role in that have been Stoicism and then a faith-based upbringing that I've had. Both of those things have really shaped a lot of my mindset, my way of framing and filtering literally everything that happens on a day-to-day basis. So first off, let me just kind of riff with you here on how I would describe Stoicism. So from my point of view, Stoicism is about really narrowing your focus to what's actually in your control. So very often folks will say, life is going to throw you curveballs. Like, people say things like that, and people are going to, act a certain way towards you. There are events that are going to occur that are out of your control. Situations are not always going to go the way that you had hoped. You will have outcomes that won't always line up with the result that you expected based on the work that you put in. So to me, the Stoic approach is to stop spending mental energy on what you can't touch and what you can't control, and really put all of your weight behind what you absolutely can control and have the most direct impact on, which would be your actions, your attitude, the mindset, in which you approach and evaluate things, and just your overall response to those things that happen, the things that people say, the events that occur, the outcomes that you get. So that doesn't mean that you're shutting off emotions or that you're like pretending that things don't matter to you. For me, it means that you're noticing the frustration, the fear, the disappointment, the overall feelings, and then asking, okay, what's the next move that's actually my move to make? So for me, it's like basically strength training for my head, like really putting in the reps in things like clarity and discipline and resilience. So I can see some parallels here with how this also shows up in my coaching. And a couple of episodes ago, I shared some reflections on previous experiences that impact and, from my perspective, positively bias how I coach. So when I'm working with clients and things don't always go according to their plan, my plan, our plan, whatever it may be, and that can look a number of different ways. It can be where progress is going to stall, someone is going to get frustrated, or just in general under the umbrella of life getting in the way. Like all of these things happen. And again, my focus on and the impact of Stoicism really plays a role in how I coach people through things like that. So because of the mindset that I have, I primarily focus mostly on responding in a very measured way instead of reacting completely emotionally. And overall, I believe that it helps me guide folks forward with perspective rather than adding even more stress to the situation. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I just got that from reading like some of the most popular Stoics like Marcus Aurelius or Seneca or Epictetus. A lot of that perspective actually comes from a faith-based upbringing. I have previously talked about and will continue to always reference being brought up in a household where God was and currently still is the center of the household. Anyone who has had the pleasure of spending, I'd say, at least 4 minutes with either of my parents understands very, very quickly that God is the center of the household. For any time that we've traveled to my parents' home, myself, any of my kids, my wife, actually my wife's family has also visited with my parents. One of the things that is common practice is there will be prayer before we hit the road. Just throughout interaction with my parents, you will not be surprised to know that I was raised in a faith-based household. My grandfather, who I have referenced very, very often, my grandfather on my father's side, who passed away a number of years ago, was a pastor down in Alabama. At one point, I believe he was pastoring like 5 churches, literally all at the same time, while also being a farmer. So, a strong core that directly relates to a good portion of the perspective that I have is based on that faith-based upbringing. So growing up, I was really taught to trust God with what's outside of my control and really focus on being faithful with what's in front of me. So that truly gave me a foundation that, as I have grown again now into my 40s and then hopefully beyond, that gave me a foundation that definitely overlaps with the things that I've learned as I've embraced more and more around the philosophies of Stoicism. So the faith side has given me a good, solid base of the why behind trying to live a certain way. Certainly not going to pretend like I'm perfect, nowhere near. But it gave me something to use as a foundation for the why. And then I find that as I've continued to grow, then marrying that with Stoicism has given me some real tangible ways to execute the how when it comes to really understanding the ability and the importance of controlling what I can actually control. Now, I want to be completely upfront. There are definitely critiques of Stoicism. There are some people who see it as emotional suppression. So if you're always controlling your reaction, then it can very much look like you're ignoring your feelings. And I have for sure received this feedback, and I continue to receive this feedback at times. And that's a big part of what really led to me jotting down like just the overall thought as I opened up this episode of being unbothered doesn't mean that I don't care. It's really more a matter of getting an understanding and developing. And, let me finish my thought and then I'll say it's more for me really committing to developing the ability to not immediately allow my emotions and my feelings to dictate the very next thing that I do. Now, I can definitely tell you that this has been and will continue to be a work in progress. However, as my grandfather used to always say, can tell that as I've continued to focus on developing this particular skill, and it is definitely a skill, as I've focused on really developing it, it gets more and more fluid, more seamless, more efficient to not have to be intentional every single time there's something that happens about taking that pause and figuring out, okay, here's what my reply is going to be. It's not like I need to stop and like freeze time and we need to take 10 minutes for me to go through this whole thing. There are certain things that will happen throughout a day, whether it's a client presents to me something that's going on that is just really got them upset. They're really bummed about something. There's something that just completely was unexpected that threw them off their plan. Or even outside of my coaching work, when I'm in my retail leadership position inside of a building and I've got a customer, I'm being brought into a situation where a customer is very, very escalated. These are particular situations where, for the most part, I'm not going to say every time, however, for the most part, it doesn't take a whole lot of time to be able to try and pause the interaction, to be able to try and have some control over what the reply, not reaction, but the reply is going to be. And that has taken time. It's taken a lot of practice. And there are still moments where it's a little bit more difficult than others. And also, I don't expect to ever have a point where it's just completely automatic 100% of the time. I think at that point it could potentially shift over to being like uncaring, but just wanted to share that. So again, there are definitely critiques where some people do see this is emotional suppression, and it can seem as though, I'm just not really paying attention. I don't really care, that sort of a thing. And to that, I would say that I think that emotions and feelings tend to show up automatically. It's just that I don't prescribe to letting those particular things always run the show. Even if you really study the Stoics, like Seneca, one of the main Stoics, as far as writings that are available, he admitted to grief and he didn't deny it. It's just he refused to let it define him. And another critique that has been thrown my way around about Stoicism is that it can really make people disengage. Like, okay, well, I can't control politics, or, I can't control racism, and I can't control inhumane treatment, and I can't control injustice. So I'm just going to focus on myself. But if you actually go through some of the readings, especially of Marcus Aurelius, let me see if I jotted this down. Get a tab. Okay, there we go. So Marcus Aurelius, he was like constantly reminding himself that humans are built for cooperation. And he had this quote that says, "What's bad for the hive is bad for the bee." So the point isn't to withdraw. It's really to engage with the world without being consumed by the world. And for myself, and where my political views and my views on humans in general, and my view on my views on politics, culture, people, lifestyle, all of that stuff, it is definitely something where Stoicism, and again, that's rooted, the roots of my attraction to Stoicism start with a faith-based core, or foundation, I should say. I am finding that I am having to draw on those particular things more often with higher frequency during this current presidential administration. I mean, I make no secret of that. I've even done a couple of episodes about particular things that have happened so far during this particular administration. And I'll continue to periodically share particular points of view because I'm not one that is ever going to co-sign never speaking up about certain things. I also am not someone who is going to always utilize this platform to speak up about absolutely everything, if that makes sense. So it really just goes back to the philosophy of I'm going to control what I can control. And for my own mental health and my mental energy, I make those decisions on what I'm going to do about particular situations or speak up about certain things in what particular environments and platforms. So something I want to share also, like, don't get it twisted. Even if I'm not necessarily posting about something on Instagram doesn't mean that it's something that I'm not addressing in my own day-to-day life. I think that's something we can get really caught up in, is thinking that if you don't hear someone with a platform, or you don't notice someone with a platform utilizing that platform 100% of the time with 100% of the things that are happening in the news, then that means they must not care about it. Like, we've gotten my general perspective is that things have become so warped that we are starting to put more of a priority, more emphasis on however someone shows up on social media matters more than the way that they show up in everyday life and the things that we don't see and we don't hear. So I think that's just something to keep in mind. Like, it's still kind of wild to me that someone can assume that if they didn't see something on social media from a particular individual, then that means that it didn't happen. I can't tell you the number of times that I may have run into somebody and I'll mention something that I've been working on for quite a while, something I've been consistent with, some particular activity that I'm involved in. And they're like, oh, I didn't realize you were involved in that. I've never seen you post about it. I'm just going to tell you guys, like, newsflash, I don't post about most of the things that I'm involved in, to be quite honest with you. And I would venture to say there's a decent amount of folks who, even with the fact that they post a lot and they post consistently, just assume that they're not necessarily posting most of what they're actually spending their time doing. You're still getting these snippets. So just keep that in mind. All right. So back to my point, and then just kind of finishing things out. Again, when it comes to the critiques about Stoicism, again, people can feel like it's emotional suppression, and they can feel like, well, that means that you just basically don't engage with certain things. And that just doesn't tend to be the case. And I will tell you, for me personally, like, these things show up in day-to-day life also. The phrasing is often used, life is going to throw you curveballs, like it's guaranteed. But my take is that just because it's a curveball doesn't mean that you can't hit it. And that's an analogy that really sticks out for me as being the parent of a baseball player, because the problem is most of us keep expecting fastballs. Like, it's just becomes interesting to me when people talk about, it kind of threw me a curveball. And I'm like, since when? I understand that you were thrown a curveball, and also people hit curveballs all the time. Like, I watch my son and his friends hit curveballs on a regular basis. So perhaps the problem is that we keep expecting fastballs. So this frame of mind really just helps me stay the course and adjust when I need to, and not get rattled when things don't go as expected. So just in closing, when I think about this season of life, turning 47, reflecting on what really matters, for me, the lesson is this: peace doesn't come from caring less. It comes from caring differently. I can care deeply about people, about my family, about my friends, about my clients, about my communities, without letting myself get absolutely wrecked by every outcome that's out of my hands. And that's what I truly mean when I say being unbothered isn't the same as being uncaring. For me, it's continuing to choose steadiness instead of frenzy, and engagement instead of constant withdrawal. So thank you for spending some time with me here today. Again, this is just like a free flow episode. If it did hit home for you, I would actually like to hear your thoughts. So send me a message. My contact info will be in the show notes. Or, if you want to just let me know how this particularly does play out in your life, I'd be interested in hearing that. So until next time, take care of what you can control, let go of the rest, and I'll talk to you next time.